The threatening note was slipped under Professor Chen's office door on a Tuesday. The vandalism started Wednesday. By Friday, the campus bullies were ready to make their final move against the weak literature professor. But Professor Chen had been reading more than just poetry lately. She'd been reading their patterns, their behaviors, their weaknesses. Because before she taught students how to analyze characters, she'd been trained to eliminate them. For 3 years, Sarah Chen had perfected the art of appearing harmless. Cardigans, reading glasses, a voice that never rose above a library whisper. The perfect disguise for someone whose previous job required staying invisible until the moment you struck. When the campus troublemakers decided to corner the quiet English professor in an empty parking garage, they thought they were hunting prey. They had no idea they'd just walked into a trap set by a predator. This is the story of why some people choose quiet lives, because their loud years were classified. If you believe that still waters run deeper than anyone imagines, hit that like button and subscribe, because Professor Sarah Chen is about to teach a lesson that won't be found in any textbook. Professor Sarah Chen had been perfecting her performance for 3 years. Every morning, she arrived at Millbrook College wearing soft sweaters and carrying worn leather satchels filled with poetry collections. She spoke in measured tones about metaphors and literary devices, graded papers with purple ink, and kept a small succulent on her desk. To her students, she was exactly what a literature professor should be: intellectual, gentle, completely absorbed in the world of books. It was a carefully constructed facade, and Sarah had reasons for maintaining it. Dr. Sarah Chen had spent 15 years as a CIA operative specializing in deep cover assignments and tactical psychological operations. She'd operated in hostile territories across 3 continents, spoke 7 languages fluently, and possessed skills that would never appear on any academic resume. Those days were over. A mission in Prague had gone sideways, leaving her with injuries that ended her field career and a psychological toll that made her crave the quiet predictability of academic life. The problem started during her second semester. A group led by Jake Morrison, whose father funded the new athletic complex, had discovered they could disrupt Professor Chen's classes without consequences. Sarah never raised her voice, never sent anyone to the dean's office, never pushed back. Jake interpreted her restraint as weakness. His followers, Marcus Webb, the linebacker, Tyler Brooks, whose family connections kept him enrolled, and Danny Reeves, who enjoyed causing pain, saw opportunity in her perceived helplessness. It started small. Side conversations during lectures, phones buzzing during poetry readings, assignments turned in late. Professor Chen would pause, adjust her glasses, and continue teaching as if nothing had happened. The group escalated. They moved to the back row and made comments loud enough to disrupt, but quiet enough to maintain plausible deniability. When other students complained, Jake would smile innocently and claim they were participating. Sarah Chen documented everything. Not for the administration. Institutional responses were slow and ineffective. She documented because intelligence operatives always gather information before acting. By midterm, the harassment had evolved beyond classroom disruption. The group followed Professor Chen to her office, loitered in hallways when she passed, and made comments about her appearance. Sarah continued her performance, appearing flustered while mentally cataloging their patterns and weaknesses. The first direct threat came on a Tuesday afternoon. A note slipped under her door read, "Quit teaching our class like we're idiots, or we'll make you quit teaching altogether." Wednesday brought vandalism. Her office door was scratched, her nameplate stolen, and coffee poured through the mail slot, ruining papers. Security cameras had mysteriously malfunctioned. Thursday escalated to property destruction. Sarah's car tires were slashed, the windshield cracked from a thrown rock, and "Go home" was keyed into the paint. By Friday, Sarah Chen had reached a decision. She wasn't going to file complaints or request transfers. She was going to remind herself why she'd been very good at her previous job. The confrontation came after her evening seminar. Sarah stayed late grading papers, then walked toward the parking garage at 9 p.m., knowing she was being followed. Jake Morrison and his 3 companions had been waiting. They'd chosen the location carefully. The parking garage had security camera blind spots and would be deserted. They cornered Professor Chen near her damaged car, forming a semicircle that blocked her escape routes. Jake stepped forward, emboldened by her apparent fear. He began with verbal intimidation, using language that escalated from crude to threatening. His followers joined in, feeding off each other's aggression and Sarah's apparent helplessness. Sarah Chen stood perfectly still, clutching her bag, eyes wide behind her glasses. She appeared terrified, vulnerable, exactly what they expected. Inside, she was calculating distances, noting positions, identifying the optimal sequence for neutralizing multiple hostiles. When Jake reached out to grab her arm, everything changed. Sarah's transformation was instantaneous and terrifying. The trembling professor disappeared, replaced by someone who moved with lethal precision. Jake's grabbing hand was intercepted, twisted, and hyperextended. Before he could process the pain, he was on the ground, his arm controlled in a joint lock. Marcus, the linebacker, charged forward. Sarah sidestepped with minimal movement, using his momentum against him. A precisely applied pressure point sent him crashing into a concrete pillar, stunned and gasping. Tyler tried to flee, but Sarah's voice stopped him cold. The whisper was gone, replaced by a tone that commanded absolute obedience. Tyler froze mid-step. Danny pulled a knife. Sarah moved like water, flowing around his attack, disarming him, and applying a chokehold that rendered him unconscious in seconds. In less than 90 seconds, four young men who'd spent months terrorizing a literature professor were neutralized. Jake remained conscious but immobilized, Sarah's grip maintaining perfect control. Sarah knelt beside Jake, her voice returning to its classroom whisper. She explained that their harassment had been documented and could be reported at any time. Assault charges against a faculty member would result in immediate expulsion and criminal prosecution. But more importantly, they had just learned something about making assumptions. They'd assumed that quiet meant weak, that gentle meant helpless, that teaching poetry was incompatible with other skills. Sarah stood, adjusting her cardigan. She suggested they spend the weekend reconsidering their approach to her class and to treating others with respect. Some people choose quiet lives not because they're afraid of loud ones, but because they've learned the value of peace. Monday morning brought remarkable changes to Professor Chen's contemporary poetry seminar. Jake Morrison and his companions attended class, sat in the front row, took detailed notes, and participated respectfully. Their assignments were submitted on time with genuine effort. Other students noticed the transformation but couldn't explain it. Professor Chen appeared unchanged, same cardigans, same gentle demeanor, same passion for literary analysis. But something in the classroom dynamic had shifted. Sarah never referenced the parking garage incident. She continued teaching with the same intellectual rigor and nurturing approach. But occasionally, when discussions became heated, she would remove her reading glasses and clean them thoughtfully. Word spread quietly through campus. Professor Chen wasn't someone to underestimate. Students began to see her differently, not as weak, but as someone who chose kindness over other options. Her classes became more popular. Her reputation grew. Sarah Chen had found the balance she'd been seeking. She could remain the literature professor she wanted to be while knowing she retained the skills she'd always possessed. The quiet life wasn't a retreat from strength, it was strength expressed through different channels. The semester concluded with student evaluations praising Professor Chen's teaching excellence and the respectful atmosphere she maintained. Several noted that her class had taught them important lessons about judging others and treating everyone with dignity. Sarah Chen's story reminds us that strength comes in many forms, and that quiet people often carry the loudest histories. Sometimes the most powerful response to intimidation isn't escalation, it's demonstrating that you never needed to prove anything in the first place. If this story moved you, please like this video and subscribe to Everyday Quiet Heroes. Share it with someone who believes that true strength doesn't need to announce itself, and that underestimating quiet people is always a mistake. If you or someone you know has experienced similar acts of quiet heroism, please share those stories in the comments. They inspire us and help shape future stories that celebrate everyday courage. Thank you for watching, and remember, the next time you encounter someone who seems gentle and unassuming, consider that they might be choosing that gentleness from a position of incredible strength.